We are the Varsity Voices, your home for everything Chicago Catholic League football. I'm Joe Frevoletti, and here with me is my co-host, Dan Frevoletti, and this is your Week 8 recap. With just 1 week left in the regular season, every game counts, playoff dreams are being made, and some are hanging by a thread. We'll break down all the action from this weekend, including dominant wins by IC, Carmel, Marist, and Joliet Catholic, and the battles that shaped the standings. We'll highlight some of the players who rose to the moment under the Friday night lights, and of course, we'll reveal our Zuko's Dog of the Week winner. So let's jump right in. Dan, as you and I talked about or mentioned on our Friday Night Blitz episode, not only the halftime but the final scores, we said blowout weekend. I think we said running clock weekend. But as I thought more about it and looked at some of these, I thought maybe we should call it disparity weekend.
There you go. I like it, Joe.
What do you think of that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
because I was saying running clock roundup is what we could change.
That's a good one too.
But
right.
Yes, disparity weekend. Other than a couple games, like we split the games in half. I had one compelling game.
Right.
Into the fourth quarter.
If you are looking to buy or sell a home, contact RE/MAX Realtor and Circle of Legends recipient Christopher Cobb. Let Chris's extensive negotiating experience work to guide you on all of your real estate buying and selling needs. Contact Christopher now to discuss the right strategy for your personalized real estate buying and selling plan. His number is 630-420-0070, or you can visit his website at christophercobb.com.
And I'm not sure I had any compelling games. So when it comes down to it, we're getting down to the last week of the season. The cream rises to the top, but we are starting to see over the course of the last couple games some of the disparity between some of the bigger teams or teams with more kids in their program versus some of the teams that have less. But that's not necessarily the complete case because you've got some smaller schools that like Montini and IC who have
St.
a
Francis.
ton of talent, right?
Yeah.
St. Francis.
Yep.
So it's just a disparity between the haves and have-nots, I think.
That's a great way to put it, Joe. It seems like, I don't know if it's growing. Like we said, we can talk about this maybe more, have an episode dedicated to it after the season.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, we'd have to, I think the debate is whether it's a cycle that's just kind of where it's at right now, or if it's a trend, so that'd be something to talk about. It'll be something I'm sure the league talks about when they talk about redoing the divisions, which will happen after this year. So, more to come on this because this year it's really, really been evident how far the difference is between, it feels like the purple and red and the blue, green, orange, and white.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and again, don't know again if it's a cycle or if it's just something that we're going to see more and more of, but what can be done about it.
Yeah, we've talked about with other things too, like with the playoffs and that after last year, you can try and manipulate things as much as you want to fit your narrative, so to speak, if you're talking about a particular school specifically. But I do think it's kind of cyclical and, it comes down to just be better. So you can juggle teams around, put them in this division, that division. You can change things, but it's like, you know what? If you're going to compete in the Chicago Catholic League, you've just got to be better, right?
Yeah.
There
are certain things that these Catholic League teams are doing, whatever it is they've got. They seem to have, the ones that, and I don't want to say the ones some do and some don't, or that it's perfectly, fits with administrative support. The ones that do are great. The ones that don't, because I think there's good administrative support throughout the league. However, there definitely seems to be a way that some of these schools are compiling talent that other schools are not.
there is a way to that, or a process, right? I think,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and we've talked about that, and I think that's part of being better, right?
Yeah.
As a program,
Mm-hmm.
um, not necessarily just on the football field, but the kids and the players and the student athletes that you are getting and letting into your school, right?
Right.
I think that's all part of it. So I think we've talked about the Chicago Catholic League maybe has to look at what they're doing in regards to the disparity. But I think if you go a level deeper, it's the particular schools that have to look at what they're doing individually to compete in a league like this, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
It's got to be, the football program, I had an AD once that said the football program, kind of has touches on more students than anything else. If you include the band, the cheer squads, whatever, the most parents, the most attendance, all that stuff, the most press coverage, I guess, maybe, if you think about that, maybe, or men's basketball or boys basketball, but it certainly is something that I think in this league, you've got to be good at football,
Right.
too. And I don't know what that gets you other than, continuing to be good at football, but I do think there's probably something to it that maybe we can't measure as far as enrollment, that sort of thing. But there's definitely something to it that if you want to be good at football in this league, there are certain things you have to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's probably cyclical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is something to making your program better and putting the processes or steps in place to make your program better, right? If you ignore some of that and some of the other schools are doing that, you're going to fall behind, which I think is a part of it.
Yeah, and you
Just a part
shouldn't
of it,
be.
not
Yeah, right,
everything, but a part
right.
of it. Yeah.
Because you still have. We talked about this the other night. You still have teams that look more physically capable than other teams, and that's
Right.
that's an off-season weight room thing. So that's a part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got the numbers. And that's a part of it, and maybe that falls under administrative support. I don't know, but and that could all be if you get buy-in from everyone involved and you have processes in place that allow you to attract more football players, then that could be part of the administrative support thing. But
Right.
there's some of these, it's clear that there are right now that disparity is pretty big.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm not sure. We'll talk about this, like you said,
Yeah. Yep.
probably really soon after
Yeah.
the season ends. So
Yeah.
stay tuned with us because
Oh.
we'll cover this in more detail for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But tonight, let's talk about the Week 8 games, Dan. What the games you had on your slate? Which ones do you want to go over? Or which one do you want to go through first?
Let's do my the best game I had first.
Okay.
So, and that was Mount Carmel defeating Fenwick 35-28. Joe, Emmett Dowling threw for 3 touchdowns and over 200 yards. Marshawn Thornton had 2 of those touchdowns. Fenwick had a great effort against the number 1 team, and you would guess it, but Tommy and Jake Thies led the way. Along with getting a huge interception from Mike Murphy, which tied the game, pick 6, which tied the game at 28, before Mount Carmel was able to put the game away late in the 4th quarter. Mount Carmel looked every bit as talented. They just seem to rise up if they get challenged at all. They have an answer every single time that they need one. They come at you we said it Friday night, with just waves of talent. The next player they bring in is, gosh, he looks as good as the first guy in. So you really, any team that's playing them in the playoffs is going to have to play a really, really good game to beat them because they are just so talented.
They are.
Yeah. So big game next week. It'll be interesting to see. Mount Carmel goes to Loyola. And Fenwick's another great game to watch. Maybe the game of the weekend in the Catholic League. Fenwick will travel to Carmel and Mundelein, in what seems like might be the most exciting game to watch.
Yeah, it might be. And you're right, Dan. Mount Carmel just, we mentioned this on Friday as we were following the games and doing some of our score updates. But, the people or players they are able to bring in that we haven't necessarily seen over the course of the whole season. They just bring wave after wave after wave of talented players. And, over the course of a 4-quarter game, they just wear the other teams down with talent, right?
Yes.
And execution as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're right. It's a great point because we said it Friday night as we watched the end of that game together. We said it once, 2 or 3 times. Who's this guy?
right.
And they're all guys that offensively they make you. If you miss a tackle by an inch, they're gone, or they have big play that results in just your average broken tackle or missed tackle. It's unbelievable. So they really make you pay, and there's no letdown from first to second team.
No, there isn't.
Very
All
little.
right, yeah, very little for sure. All right, so the St. Viator versus IC game. So this was at St. Viator on Friday night, and Viator came out and scored first. They've got a really good kicker that we haven't talked about, this year, in Alex Nemec.
Yeah,
he kicked a 50-yard field goal.
I saw that. Yeah,
put Viator up 3-0. But after that, it was all IC. Nate Lang, he went deep early, connected on a 69-yard touchdown to Quay McGee. He later found Anthony Caraccio for 78 yards. Foley Calcagno got in on it, as well as
Caraccio and Calcagno. Yeah, yes. I love it.
Yeah, a lot of Italian guys. We like that. Yeah. Oh, and Isaac Barrientos. I'm not sure that's Italian or not, but it's close.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Close enough for our purposes.
Yeah, they each added rushing scores. Lang hit McGee again just before halftime, and at halftime, this game is over. It was 35-3. IC over Viator. After that, they IC brought in backups from at the quarterback. And he even threw a couple of touchdown passes in the second half. So IC really cruised to a 49-9 victory over St. Viator. Viator went to 1-7. IC goes to 6-2, and IC to me seems like they're really clicking here. As they kind of head into the end of the regular season and into the playoffs. So it's a good spot to be for IC. We'll see what their playoff draw is, after next week. But I think IC is primed and ready, for the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they seem like one of a few teams that is peaking at the right time.
Right, for sure.
All right, Joe. So we'll move to. Did you have anything else on them?
No, that was it. It's your turn.
All right. Yeah. St. Francis over DePaul Prep, 35-14. So Brock Phillip, quarterback for St. Francis, left this game with an injury at some point early in the first half, but no problem there. Iggy Amorotu. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
It's a good name.
Yes.
However you say it.
He threw for 2 and ran for 1. Milivojevic had a touchdown. Zach Washington had a touchdown for 80-yard TD. I don't know if Brock Phillip would have come back in the game if it was in doubt or not, but Amorotu's a sophomore, so they certainly look to be in good hands. For DePaul Prep, Tyson Hooks is their main weapon, and he's a good one. He can keep a team in a game. He's good right now. He's going to be a great one. So DePaul Prep out of the playoffs. St. Francis in a good position. They are at Nazareth next week for another marquee game within the Catholic League. Yeah. Meanwhile, DePaul hosts Bennett, 2 teams that are out of the playoffs this year. So So the Francis at Nazareth game will be the one to watch next week. But just to give you the score again, Joe, St. Francis 35 to Paul Prep 14.
Okay. Yeah, and the next game was for me was Loyola and Carmel Mundelein, and a game that we were looking at or pointing to as a really big game. And this was all Carmel, which surprised me a bit in watching this game. Carmel took over early. They never let up. They rolled to a 42-14 win over Loyola. Quarterback, Trey Taylor, he was outstanding. He completed 25 of 31 passes for 349 yards. He also added a rushing touchdown. Really kind of carved up Loyola's defense. Loyola could never really get going in this game. Quarterback Matt Lee did hit their sophomore wideout Jordan McKinley early in this game for a touchdown, but that was about all Loyola could muster against Carmel's defense, and Carmel's offense was just clicking. I think Trey Taylor ended up with 30 of 36 for 384 yards and 4 touchdowns, plus a rushing touchdown for him. So he is dialed in. He's got 2 really good receivers in Kai Owens and Eli Jackson, who also plays defense as well. They both, Kai Owens, I think, had over 100 yards receiving. Eli Jackson, over 80 yards receiving. And also somebody that we haven't talked about this year, Greg Bess-Henning, 7 catches for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. So
it's a nice night.
Carmel's got a lot of weapons here, and they're another team that I think, like I see, is really kind of peaking at the right time. And I don't want to downplay what a kind of a signature win this is for Carmel, within the Chicago Catholic League, and taking down Loyola and taking them down pretty easily. So, congrats to Carmel in this game. They, they're squarely in the playoffs, obviously, but they put Loyola in a tough spot. Loyola's got to win next week to be considered, for the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there. But again, great win for Carmel, 42-14 over Loyola.
All right, Joe. So seeing your Trey Taylor stats, I see your Trey Taylor stats. I'm gonna counter.
You're gonna raise me?
Raise you with Izzy Abrams stats.
All right, yeah.
Izzy Abrams was 20 of 24 for 441 yards, 4 touchdowns, and ran for 1 in Montini's 49-7 victory over St. Ignatius. Luca Florio had 2 touchdown receptions. Isaac Alexander, former Dawg, had 2 touchdowns rushing and 1 receiving. They dominated this game from the start. This is one I was following online rather than actually viewing, but just total domination. The score kept creeping up and up and up and up. It was 28-0 at halftime. Montini, Joe, will try and finish an undefeated season at St. Lawrence next week. And while St. Ignatius has a tough task by finishing their season, wrapping up with Brother Rice. So tall order for St. Ignatius, who will miss the playoffs for the 2nd year in a row. And Montini is another one of those teams that seems to be hitting on all cylinders. Like I see like the completion percentage going up, the yards. This reads like an NFL stat line for Izzy Abrams, like from, Tom Brady or something. So
Right.
they're really, really clicking. They're going to be in 4A this year, so have to be considered the favorite in 4A.
Yeah. The other thing in looking at some of these teams like Carmel, like Montini, like IC, St. Francis, when we go week to week and we do these recaps, one of the things that I look at and I think about when I read some of the information on the games is I start to see additional names getting involved. on offense or even on defense too. And that tells me that it's a program or an offense that is kind of growing and really clicking at the right time, when they start to get more and more people and more weapons involved, on the offensive side of the ball primarily.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I don't know if that's a result of the games being in hand and more people are playing, or like you said, if they're finding other weapons, which is just outstanding going into the playoffs, because injuries don't stop just because you're in the playoffs.
Right.
You're going to need people with experience and to have some of these names that we haven't said a lot during the year step up. It can only bode well for these teams as they enter the playoffs.
Yeah. Okay. So the next game that I was watching, Dan, was the Marmion versus Marist game, and Marist traveled out to Marmion, and by halftime, the outcome of this game was effectively settled. Marist exploded to a 44-0 lead and never let up. And they ended up winning this game 51-6. Marist offense really clicked, and they primarily relied on the running game in this game, and they used their size up front on the offensive line to really kind of dominate Marmion and Marmion's defense, and it showed in this game. From a standpoint of size and physicality, that Marist is just kind of that step above as far as where Marmion is at this point. And Marmion was without their starting quarterback again, Roy Magana, which hurts them because they've got to put Vinny Testa there, who does a good job, but it takes one of your weapons away on offense, and Vinny Testa being able to put him somewhere else, right? So, Marmion just could not counter what Marist brought in this game, primarily size, strength, physicality, and a running game, and it showed. And like I said, Marist rolled to a 51-6 victory here. Marist is still in a tough spot. Marmion essentially kind of out of the playoffs now. Marist is one of the teams that's been mentioned as might be able to get in with 4 wins, in 8A. We'll see if that happens, but they've got to win next week in order to do that. So, but they seem to be kind of clicking here at the right time. They started out really slow, unfortunately for them. A couple more wins at this point, I'm sure they would love to have under their belt, but they're behind the 8 ball too, and they've got to win next week in order just to get to 4 wins, and then hope the lottery balls kind of fall their way after that point. Yeah.
Joe, do you know who they play next week, Marist?
I do not. Let me.
It's okay.
I can look real quick. Hold on.
I can't do. I should have been looking. See, a good partner would look while you.
Yes. Come on, I need a. Yeah.
Notre Dame.
Oh, they play Notre Dame, right?
Yeah.
I just saw it at the same time you did. Yeah. So I mean, they've got a good chance to get that 4th win, but
right, they'll be favored in that.
But again, even getting that, they're not guaranteed a spot. They need everything to kind of fall their way in order to, to get into the playoffs. They probably got a lot of playoff points for sure. They played a tough schedule. So it'll put them in a good position, but they need that win for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Joe. Nazareth. We'll go to Nazareth and Bennett. Nazareth defeated Bennett 42-14 on Friday. Bennett again had some early hope with a pick, an interception by Dom Tamala, but that was kind of the highlight for them before this game was entered running clock phase. Nazareth got touchdowns from Justin Watson, Dylan Wellner, Charles Calhoun had 2. Jake Sestone was on the receiving end of a touchdown from Jackson Faya. So Nazareth just kind of rode this one out. I know that I read that Bennett is in a tough spot with some of the injuries, but But Nazareth wins this one kind of going away. It was never really in doubt. As I mentioned before, Nazareth hosts St. Francis in a big game next week, and DePaul hosts Bennett. So an interesting one for Nazareth next week, but they win this one easy, Joe, 42-14.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've got St. Patrick versus St. Rita. Was another game. This was on Friday night at St. Pat's. And St. Rita really came out firing. I think they know their backs are against the wall. Their BATW as far as getting into the playoffs, and they put up a really decisive win here, 49-14 over St. Pat's. St. Pat's got on the board first, actually, but then it was all St. Rita after that. They do have Walter Jones back, who had a good night and a receiving touchdown, as well as their other wide receiver. I'm trying to think of his name. Last name is Donovan, but I can't think of his first name at this point. But he had a good night as well. Stephen Armbruster, threw the ball real well. So St. Rita seems to be, after a kind of a slow start for them, they seem to be coming on at the end of the season here. They've put themselves in a tough position. They need to win next week as well to make sure they get into the playoffs. But that's, with 5 wins. St. Pat's is in the same position. They've got 4 wins. They're 4-4. They need a win as well to get into the playoffs. So these are 2 teams which both need a win next week in order to put themselves in playoff position.
Yeah, St. Pat's plays St. Viator, so you got to think they're in a pretty good position there. Now St. Rita is at IC, and that's that. Now that as we go through these games, Joe, and looking to next week, we have some fun games on Friday night that are. This is definitely one worth watching. It's so critical for St. Rita. IC's already punched their ticket. I wonder how that game will play out. And if you're IC and you don't have the numbers. Are you thinking rest some of these guys, or are you going for it? That'll be interesting to see. I don't be a tough call on what to do.
What would you do as the coach? Would you rest your guys if you're already in the playoffs, or do you want them to stay sharp? You don't want to send that message. What is it?
It's a good question for all those reasons. I think if I'm in IC's position, I might play them a little bit and rest them a little bit. If you can do that, rest or play them a quarter. And, I don't know, only because they have their numbers are so critical to them. They aren't, we talked about Mount Carmel coming at you in waves. IC doesn't have that ability. Now they are talented and it seems like they've got talent, but it's young, if their next player in might be a freshman or sophomore. So for that reason, I might be careful with my guys for sure.
Yeah, they don't have the numbers. They've got several of their stars or key players going both ways, right? Which makes a difference too. For me, if I were coaching, I would think, if I've got this guy playing, say Foley Calcagno, right? He's playing on offense. He's one of your key players on offense. He's one of your key players on defense as well. Do you want to play that kid the whole game?
Right. Yeah.
Or do you want to make sure he's fresh, not hurt, whatever, going into the playoffs?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question, because high school football is not, NFL football or anything like that. So it doesn't necessarily, you only have so many chances to play. IC is 6-2. So you don't necessarily want to be a 6-3 team. You might see a 9-0 team, then there's that. You've got to balance that as well.
Right.
So,
all right, that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, be interesting to see. So, we've got some correspondence there, so we can know what the deal is going in.
For sure.
Okay. All right, Providence beats Marian Catholic 48-13, and Providence dominated this one with some help from Marian Catholic and some self-inflicted wounds. There was an early interception by Providence's Blake Garrigan that led to a score, and then a bad snap on a punt for Marian Catholic that was a scoop and score for Providence. Along the way, Broden Mackett rushed for a TD. Sophomore Thomas Edwards had a long TD for reception for Marian Catholic, but that was by far the highlight of that game. Providence squarely in the playoffs, playing for seeding now. They have another really interesting game. They travel to Joliet Catholic where they wrap up with a rivalry game. And, I think they might call that the Holy War.
I do like that. Although it seems a little dramatic to me, but I do like it.
You mean it's not really a holy war? Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So, and Marian Catholic, I don't know if they finish with Marmion or they might have De La Salle next week. So, anyway, but Providence wins this one going away 48-13.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The next game for me was De La Salle and Joliet Catholic. The final score in this game was Joliet Catholic 49, De La Salle nothing. This was a running clock at the starting the third quarter. It was 42-0. Beginning the third quarter, and it's kind of it played out exactly how we thought it might play out. I mean, De La Salle was overmatched from a standpoint, really from a physical standpoint.
Sure.
And you could see that on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. But Joliet Catholic came out and they were ready. They wanted a win here for sure. And they exerted their influence and dominance over De La Salle. De La Salle is not quite ready to compete with kind of the physical nature of a team like Joliet Catholic, and it showed in this game. So De La Salle, they go 0-8. Joliet Catholic improves their record to 3-5. I believe they're essentially out of the playoffs as well. They're going to be one of those teams, based on next week, and if they get a win and get 4 wins, they're going to be hoping that something miraculous happens as far as the playoffs are concerned. But, tough year for Joliet Catholic, even though they've had some good games. They played a lot of teams really tough, but they just have not had enough.
Their schedule was brutal.
Schedule was really, really tough. And, it's going to be a different year for Joliet Catholic, this year, not getting into the playoffs and not being one of those teams that, considered a favorite or one of the favorites to win a state championship. So that's got to be tough for them. But, their kids and their players are really still playing really hard, which does not surprise me.
No, they're pretty prideful there.
Pretty prideful. So I'm sure they're going to want to leave a good mark next week and, get a win and get themselves to 4-5 for the season. And for them, this was a good win, expected, but, putting up 49 points and, kind of cruising to a victory here was good for Joliet Catholic.
All right, Joe. Last game I have is Brother Rice over St. Lawrence, 48-6. Joe, Jalen Green scored 4 touchdowns, and he is so much fun to watch.
Yeah,
carry the football. God, he's got great vision, runs like an NFL running back. I mean, he just really, really something. Got great speed, great balance. He's a lot of fun and led the way for Brother Rice. They got standout performances all over the field. Defensively, Braden Parks, Michael Fitzgerald, King Liggins, Brendan Dickman, Austin Durkos. St. Lawrence did get a long touchdown pass from Jimmy McDermott to Matthew Williams, but Brother Rice controlled this one pretty much from the start. The only thing that seemed to keep St. Lawrence drives alive were some defensive penalties, and I think I said during the broadcast during the podcast on Friday that it felt like Brother Rice was committing penalties so they could continue to play defense. They really look like they enjoy it. They swarm and they get after it. And they host St. Ignatius next week. before playoff pairings get released. And St. Lawrence then would be, oh, why am I so Fenwick's? St. Lawrence and Montini are next week.
Right.
I'm not sure where that one's at, but that will wrap up the schedule. I think St. Lawrence, if I can look here real fast, trying to see where St. Lawrence is from a playoff standpoint. They're 5-3.
Their 5 wins.
Yeah, so they're likely in. But you really want to be 6-3 over 5-4. You're almost guaranteed to get a 9-0 team. Now, sometimes that can be good or bad. That's another podcast discussion as far as seedings go. It's one of your favorite discussions, I know.
Sure is.
Yeah, so we'll have to see where they're at and be a fun game to watch next week.
Yeah, so this is another game that I was thinking, Dan, Montini and St. Lawrence. If you're Coach Wachowski, and we've talked to him several times, and I don't know what my answer would be on this, but are you thinking about maybe playing your players a half and then kind of resting them, or do you think you keep your foot on the pedal, right? Press to the floorboard, and keep going here.
Yeah, I think Montini's going to play them all. I think there's a desire for a 9-0 season there. That's pretty compelling. We very, very big deal in the Catholic League, especially with the schedule they play in the division they play in. So I could see them playing their players, at least until if and when. I'm not sure. St. Lawrence is good, so it's not.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee you're going to be more than a touchdown or two up. So I'm thinking Montini plays their guys.
Yeah, and so we've really only got 2 teams in the Chicago Catholic League that can go undefeated. That's Mount Carmel and Montini, right?
Yeah. I think early on we said that those two were 2 on our list that could go undefeated before the season started, which feels like yesterday, by the way.
Right,
but I think we also maybe had St. Rita on that list. That was going to be a stretch with Mount Carmel, but anyway, yeah. So I think it's a big deal for them, and I think you'll see them keep their foot on the gas.
Okay, so the last game I had, and this was a Saturday game, and this was Notre Dame versus Leo. And Notre Dame came into this game, and they were ready to play. No letdowns here, which I love to see for Notre Dame and for Leo as well. They both were in a kind of a tough spot as far as needing wins to kind of keep their playoff hopes alive, hopefully. But they both end up 3-5 after this game, because Notre Dame wins this game 40-18 over Leo. Notre Dame looked like they got their offense really on track here. This is the most points they scored all year, 40 points. I think they were only averaging just under like 16 or 15 points a game, Notre Dame, up until now. So, they were able to put together a good offensive plan and put some points on the board. Leo just could not hang with Notre Dame in this game. And Leo, after a pretty good start, really, ran into some tough opponents within the Chicago Catholic League. And they lose this game. They go to 3-5. Like I said, Notre Dame is 3-5. Essentially, both of these teams are out of the playoffs. But I do have to say, for Notre Dame and under new coach DeFranza, as well as Leo under new coach Theo Hopkins, I would look at this season for both of these teams as kind of a building year, right? A program building year, because they both made some strides from last year to this year. So I really like that with both of these teams, because it, I think the arrow is pointing up for both of them. I feel like they've got like whatever kind of basics they wanted to put in place from a program standpoint. I feel like both Notre Dame and Leo has done that. And now, the challenge for them is to grow on that, from this year to next year. right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, this was a good game for that, just to see where these two teams are at and to see if they're going to be able to kind of take that next step, but Notre Dame wins this game pretty easily. But I'm looking forward to next year with both of these teams.
Yeah, they both, like you said, they both have to. Well, I'm sure they didn't say that. Hey, guys, this is a rebuilding year. You don't want to tell your seniors that, but
Right.
But I think probably feel that way that it wasn't going to happen overnight. So that's really tough to do in this conference. So I think they both played young people.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really good for the future. So yeah, while you'd like to be in the playoffs and say you've made the playoffs, again, for those seniors, you do have to feel good about where you're at for going into 2026.
Yeah, and we talked early on in this episode about how how it was running clock disparity. What else? Blowout, those kind of things with several of the games. And what that usually means is there's some teams that have been playing some really good defense. It's not just the offenses. Their defenses have stepped up as well. So, and we always like to see those players to call out those players who've had really good defensive games from week to week. And that's why we give there's Zuko.
Yep.
Right on cue.
The winner gets Zuko this week. Day we had today with him.
Right.
They're going to love that. I'm going to bring his dog cage and everything.
Yeah,
build a house.
Bring a bucket of food.
Right.
And, you just hand him over.
His leash, couple toys. Here you go, youngster.
Yeah. Anyways, so Dan, we talked about some really good defensive performances this week by some players within the Chicago Catholic League. Who do you got in the dog pound? And tell everybody who's our Zuko's Dog of the Week winner.
All right. So we'll start with the dog pound, which is a pretty big pound.
It is.
It's like a holiday weekend at the dog pound.
Right.
Lots of dogs in here.
Yeah.
Some of the games I watch, Joe, when you watch Brother Rice, I talked about, you can tell they have a passion for defense. They love it. They play hard. Their defensive line gets a lot of accolades, deservingly so, because they are active. They are not just big guys clogging up holes. Braden Parks and King Liggins. I know Braden Parks had 9 tackles. They're both just menaces, on that defensive front. Moving along, Joe, Providence had a great game from Jackson Hutton. 9 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a sack. Really good game for him. Montini, they always have well represented in the pound. Namari Anderson, 7 tackles and a tackle for loss. Orlando Greco. Joe, do you have Orlando stats?
He had interception and 7 tackles here as well. So a couple of big plays for Orlando in the big win over Ignatius. Yeah.
All right. And moving on, Carmel defensive back Jameer Miles had an interception this week in a great performance. Javonte Williams from St. Francis, 2 interceptions, 2 passes broken up, 4 tackles. We talk about St. Francis on the offensive side of the ball. They play some good defense. They've got some guys that fly around, including another member of the dog pound, Tanner Glock from St. Francis. 2 interceptions, 3 tackles. Going back, Providence, Blake Garrigan had 3 tackles, a tackle for loss, and an interception. St. Francis, again, James McGrath had a pick, so kind of bouncing all over. Game I watched, Chris Caskey for Nazareth. He's a guy that plays really hard, just kind of dominated early on when the game, when the game was still in question. He had a tackle for loss and a sack, and just eliminates that side of the field that he's on in any kind of running game. Definitely a menace. But this week's Zuko's Dog of the Week goes to Carmel defensive back Eli Jackson. Interception in the end zone, killed a threat by Loyola, and a big victory over Loyola. Carmel's defense is playing top notch, and Eli Jackson comes out as one of the leaders and this week's winner of Zuko's Dog of the Week.
All right. Congratulations, Eli.
Yes. Well done. You got a dog. You got a new dog, Eli.
You get a new dog. Make sure you tell your parents before we come out there.
Right.
That
we'll even Joe and I'll build the doghouse in the backyard.
Right, for sure. Whack, whack, whack. There you go. You're all
there
set.
There you go.
Zuko. Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps up our Week 8 recap here on the Varsity Voices. The playoff picture in the Chicago Catholic League is starting to take shape. And next week, it's win or go home time for a lot of programs. Congratulations again to this week, Zuko's Dog of the Week, Eli Jackson. Be sure to follow and like us on wherever you listen to your podcasts, as well as on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And be sure to tune back in this week and listen to our upcoming prognosticus episode where we predict the Week 9 games and winners. And we'll also talk some playoff scenarios as well. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time under the Friday Night Lights.